The child screamed as the warp-spawned thing wearing his mother's face peeled away her skin like a discarded garment. What crawled out from beneath was something that had never known the touch of mortal flesh. Something that existed only to corrupt and devour and drag screaming souls back into the Imperium, where time had no meaning and pain lasted forever. The demon that had been masquerading as Morella Voss for the past 3 months smiled with teeth made of crystallized agony and reached for her son with fingers that dripped the essence of despair. That was when the silver giant stepped through the wall. He came not through any door or window, but through the solid rockreat itself, his form wreathed in psychic fire that burned away reality's barriers like morning mist. The demon froze, its stolen smile faltering as it beheld something it had not encountered in 10,000 years of predation. Here stood a warrior whose very existence was anathema to its kind, whose soul blazed with such purity that the creature's multiple eyes began to weep tears of molten brass. The Grey Knight spoke a single word in a language that predated human speech, and the demon's carefully constructed masquerade began to unravel. The suburban hab unit dissolved around them like a fever dream, revealing the true horror of what lay beneath. The walls ran with blood that spelled out blasphemous equations in languages that hurt to perceive. The furniture writhed with a life that was not life, transforming into baroque torture devices that screamed with the voices of their victims. And everywhere, covering every surface like a cancerous growth, were the symbols of the ruinous powers, glowing with malevolent energy that made the air itself toxic to breathe. The child cowered in the corner, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. But the Grey Knight paid him no attention. His focus was entirely on the daemon, whose true form now stood revealed in all its cosmic horror. It towered nearly 4 meters tall, its flesh a constantly shifting mass of faces that had once belonged to its victims. Each face mouthed words of accusation and despair, blaming the living for their torment while simultaneously begging for release that would never come. Its arms ended not in hands but in writhing masses of tentacles, each one tipped with a different instrument of torture drawn from the nightmares of 1 trillion sentient beings. "Cornati filth," the Grey Knight said, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond the physical. "You have violated the Emperor's domain for the last time." The demon laughed, the sound like breaking glass mixed with children's screams. "Do you know me, Silver Warrior? I am Vrakthar, the Soul Render, the thrice blessed of the Blood God. I have devoured the hopes of entire worlds and bathed in the tears of saints. What are you but another obstacle to be ground beneath my heel?" The Grey Knight raised his force weapon, a halberd that hummed with barely contained psychic energy. Along its length, sacred words in high Gothic script burned with silver fire, each inscription a prayer of banishment that had been crafted in the deepest vaults of Titan. "I am vengeance given form. I am the Emperor's judgment made manifest. I am death to all that should not be." What followed was not a battle in any conventional sense. It was an exercise in cosmic justice, a demonstration of what happened when the Imperium's most sacred warriors encountered the spawn of chaos in open combat. The demon's tentacles lashed out with speed that defied mortal perception, each strike carrying enough force to level city blocks. But the Grey Knight moved as if he existed partially outside normal space-time, his form blurring as he stepped between dimensions to avoid attacks that should have been impossible to evade. His halberd swept in perfect arcs that carved reality itself, each strike not merely cutting the demon's flesh, but severing the warp connections that allowed it to maintain coherence in the material universe. Where the blessed blade touched the creature's form, silver fire bloomed like flowers of pure destruction, consuming not just its physical manifestation, but the very concept of its existence. The demon fought with the fury of something that had never known defeat, its form constantly changing as it drew upon the power of the warp to reshape itself into increasingly nightmarish configurations. At one moment it was a writhing mass of claws and fangs, The next, a towering spider of living shadow, then a serpent whose scales were made from the screaming faces of the innocent. But each transformation only delayed the inevitable. The Grey Knight's attacks were precise, methodical, guided by centuries of training and a faith so absolute that it bordered on the divine. The end came suddenly. The Grey Knight spoke 7 words in the tongue of angels, and the demon's form began to collapse in on itself like a dying star. Its multiple voices rose in a harmony of rage and disbelief as it realized what was happening. Not just banishment back to the warp, but true destruction. The kind of annihilation that would erase it from existence so completely that even the dark gods would forget it had ever been. "This is not possible," it shrieked, its voice growing fainter as its essence unraveled. "I am eternal. You are nothing," the Grey Knight replied, and spoke the final word of unbinding. The demon disappeared in a flash of silver light, taking with it every trace of its corruption. The hab unit returned to normal, its walls clean and unmarked, its furniture simple and functional. Even the child's memories began to fade. The psychic trauma of witnessing true chaos gradually replaced by the mundane recollection of a nightmare that had seemed terrifyingly real, but was ultimately nothing more than a product of an overactive imagination. The Grey Knight stood alone in the restored room, his silver armor gleaming in the artificial light. For a moment he remained perfectly still, listening with senses that extended far beyond the physical for any trace of lingering corruption. Only when he was satisfied that the cleansing was complete did he allow himself to relax, his psychic defenses lowering from combat readiness to routine vigilance. Behind him, the child stirred, his eyes opening to see nothing more than an empty room bathed in the pale glow of the hab unit's lighting system. He would remember nothing of what had truly transpired here, nothing of his mother's possession or the demon's true form. To him, the Grey Knight had never existed, was nothing more than a figment of imagination born from the kind of half-remembered dreams that plagued all children in the 41st millennium. But somewhere in the vast archives of Titan, hidden beneath layers of psychic wards and reality-distorting technology that made them impossible for mortal minds to even contemplate, a record was made. Another demon destroyed, another incursion prevented, another small victory in a war that had been raging for 10,000 years and would continue until the stars themselves burned out. The Grey Knights existed in the spaces between official history and absolute secrecy, their very existence a contradiction that most minds simply refused to acknowledge. They were the Imperium's most sacred warriors and its most closely guarded secret, known only to the highest echelons of Imperial authority, and then only in the vaguest terms. Even among those few who were aware of their existence, the details of their origin, their methods, and their true purpose remained shrouded in mysteries that were quite literally matters of life and death. To understand the Grey Knights, one must first understand the nature of the threat they were created to face. Demons are not merely enemies in the conventional sense. They are violations of reality itself, manifestations of concepts and emotions given form and substance through the twisted physics of the warp. When a demon enters the material universe, it brings with it a fragment of the chaos realm from which it originated, warping the very fabric of space-time around itself until the laws of physics become suggestions rather than absolute truths. A single greater demon can corrupt an entire world simply by existing upon its surface for too long. Its presence seeps into the collective unconscious of the population, twisting their dreams and desires until they begin to serve the dark powers willingly. The planet's ecology warps to match the demon's nature, creating landscapes of living nightmare where trees grow backwards into the earth and rivers flow with liquid screams instead of water. Even the planet's position in space begins to shift, drawn inexorably toward alignment with configurations that serve the demon's cosmic agenda. Against such threats, conventional Imperial forces are worse than useless. A regiment of Imperial Guard might spend months fighting what appears to be a standard Xenos incursion, only to discover that their enemy has been systematically corrupting them through exposure to its unnatural presence. By the time they realize what has happened, entire companies have been turned into willing servants of chaos, their corruption so complete that they retain their tactical knowledge while serving masters who exist beyond the boundaries of sanity. Space Marines fare better, their genetic modifications and psychic conditioning providing some protection against the more subtle forms of demonic influence. But even the Emperor's angels can be overwhelmed by exposure to the pure essence of chaos, their enhanced physiology making them more valuable targets for possession rather than providing immunity to corruption. A single chaos-corrupted Space Marine represents a catastrophe that can take centuries to fully contain, their knowledge of Imperial tactics and technology making them devastating opponents when turned against their former brothers. This was the situation that faced the Emperor in the closing days of the Horus Heresy. As the forces of chaos pressed their attack on Terra itself, it became clear that humanity would need defenders specifically designed to combat threats that existed beyond the normal parameters of warfare. The Emperor had foreseen this need, had been preparing for it even before Magnus the Red's catastrophic breach of the webway had allowed demons to pour into the Imperial Palace itself. The solution he devised was both brilliant and terrible in its implications. If demons were manifestations of warp-born concepts given physical form, then the warriors created to fight them would need to be equally conceptual in nature. They would need to be more than merely enhanced humans with better weapons and stronger armor. They would need to be living weapons forged from the very concepts that demons found most abhorrent: purity, faith, and absolute dedication to the annihilation of chaos. The process by which the Grey Knights were created remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in the entire Imperium, known in its complete form only to the Emperor himself, and perhaps a handful of individuals who participated in its initial implementation. What is known, even among the Grey Knights themselves, is fragmentary and often contradictory, pieces of a puzzle so vast and complex that mortal minds cannot fully comprehend its scope. The genetic material used in their creation was not drawn from any single Primarch, as is the case with conventional Space Marine chapters. Instead, it represented a synthesis of the Emperor's own genetic template with carefully selected elements from multiple Primarch bloodlines, combined in ways that created something entirely new. Each Grey Knight carries within his cells the genetic legacy of heroes and traitors alike, their DNA modified to retain the beneficial aspects of each Primarch's gifts, while eliminating the flaws that had led to corruption. But genetics were only the foundation upon which the Grey Knights were built. Far more important were the psychic modifications that were integral to their creation from the very beginning. Unlike other Space Marine chapters, which recruit psychers as specialists to support their battle brothers, every Grey Knight is a potent psyker in his own right. Their minds are not merely resistant to chaos influence, but actively antithetical to it, broadcasting psychic frequencies that cause demons physical pain simply by being in their presence. The process of creating such warriors began with the selection of candidates, a procedure so selective that it made the recruitment processes of other Space Marine chapters seem almost casual by comparison. Potential Grey Knights were not simply chosen for their physical attributes or mental resilience, though both were certainly requirements. They were selected based on criteria that went to the very core of their spiritual nature, qualities that existed at levels so fundamental that they could not be taught or implanted but had to be present from birth. The first requirement was absolute incorruptibility, a state of spiritual purity so complete that it existed independently of conscious choice or moral education. This was not mere goodness or righteousness in the conventional sense, but something far more rare and precious, a soul that was fundamentally incompatible with the energies of chaos, incapable of being twisted or corrupted no matter what torments or temptations were applied to it. Such individuals were extraordinarily rare, perhaps 1 in 10 billion births producing a candidate with the necessary spiritual characteristics. The Imperium's agents searched throughout the galaxy for these exceptional souls, using methods that ranged from systematic psychic screening to pure instinct guided by servants whose own gifts allowed them to recognize the spark of absolute purity when they encountered it. The second requirement was psychic potential of the highest order, but psychic potential of a very specific type. Many psychers could manipulate the warp to produce dramatic effects, bending reality to their will through raw force of mind. But the Grey Knights required candidates whose psychic abilities were naturally attuned to banishment and purification, individuals whose very thoughts created ripples in the warp that were hostile to demonic entities. These candidates were brought to Titan, the moon of Saturn that would serve as the Grey Knights' fortress monastery, while still children. There, in facilities that existed partially outside normal space-time, they underwent a process of transformation that took decades to complete and changed them in ways that went far beyond the physical modifications of standard space marine creation. The first phase involved complete memory erasure, a psychic procedure so thorough that it removed not just conscious recollections, but the deep-seated emotional patterns and behavioral tendencies that shaped personality itself. The candidates' minds were wiped completely clean, leaving behind only the fundamental spiritual characteristics that had made them suitable for recruitment in the first place. This was necessary because even the slightest trace of their former lives could potentially serve as a point of vulnerability that daemons might exploit. A Grey Knight who retained even the faintest memory of a beloved sibling or a favorite meal could have that memory weaponized against him by creatures who understood how to transform love into obsession and comfort into addiction. Only by beginning with a completely blank slate could the trainers ensure that no such weaknesses would survive the creation process. The second phase involved the implantation of new memories, carefully constructed experiences that would serve as the foundation for the Grey Knights' new identities. These were not false memories in the conventional sense, but rather archetypal experiences drawn from the collective unconscious of humanity itself. Each candidate received the same basic set of implanted recollections, memories of growing up in service to the Emperor, of witnessing his glory and power, of understanding from the earliest age that their purpose was to serve as his weapons against the darkness that threatened to consume all of creation. These implanted memories were reinforced through psychic conditioning that operated at frequencies beyond conscious awareness, creating neural pathways that made loyalty to the Emperor as automatic as breathing. The candidates learned to think in High Gothic before they learned to walk in their new bodies, absorbed the litanies of banishment as easily as they learned to recognize their own names. But memory implantation was only the beginning. Far more complex was the process of psychic modification that would give each Grey Knight the mental architecture necessary to combat demonic entities. Their minds were restructured according to principles that drew upon the deepest secrets of human consciousness, creating cognitive frameworks that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. A Grey Knight's thoughts operate on at least 7 distinct levels of awareness, each one corresponding to a different aspect of psychic reality. At the most basic level, they think much like any enhanced human, processing information and making tactical decisions based on training and experience. But at deeper levels, their minds are constantly performing calculations that exist outside normal space-time, tracking the flow of warp energies and identifying patterns that indicate demonic influence. These deeper levels of consciousness are linked to psychic organs that exist only in Grey Knights, specialized neural structures that allow them to perceive and interact with the warp in ways that would be impossible for normal psychers. They can see the true names of demons written in the fabric of reality itself, read the histories of corrupted objects by touching them, and sense the presence of chaos taint across interplanetary distances. The physical modifications applied to Grey Knights follow similar principles of enhancement beyond the normal parameters of space marine creation. Their bones are not merely strengthened, but restructured at the molecular level to resonate with specific psychic frequencies, creating a natural harmony between their physical and spiritual selves. Their nervous systems are augmented with crystalline matrices that serve as organic psychic amplifiers, allowing them to channel energies that would burn out the minds of normal psychers. Most importantly, their blood is modified to carry trace amounts of substances that exist only in the deepest vaults of Titan, materials that have been sanctified through rituals that take centuries to complete. These substances make a Grey Knight's blood literally toxic to demonic entities, so inimical to the forces of chaos that even indirect contact causes demons to weaken and eventually dissipate. The creation process takes 50 years to complete, during which the candidates exist in a state that is neither fully human nor entirely post-human. They age at a dramatically reduced rate during this period, their biological processes slowed to allow for the complex modifications to take effect gradually. Many candidates do not survive the process, their minds or bodies rejecting the changes despite their initial compatibility. Those who do emerge are no longer recognizably the children who entered the chambers decades earlier. A fully mature Grey Knight stands as perhaps the pinnacle of post-human achievement, a being so far removed from baseline humanity that they exist in a different category of life entirely. They are taller and more powerfully built than even the largest space marines, their enhanced physiology allowing them to wear armor and wield weapons that would be impossible for lesser warriors to manage. Their reflexes operate at speeds that blur the line between physical movement and teleportation, their enhanced nervous systems processing information and executing responses faster than normal consciousness can follow. But their most important capabilities are psychic rather than physical. Every Grey Knight is capable of feats that would be considered miraculous by normal standards, walking through solid walls by briefly phasing into alternate dimensions, healing mortal wounds through force of will, and speaking words of power that can banish greater demons from existence with a single phrase. These abilities are not learned skills, but innate aspects of their enhanced nature, as natural to them as breathing is to baseline humans. The weapons and armor used by Grey Knights reflect their unique nature and mission. Each piece of equipment is handcrafted by master artificers using techniques that combine the most advanced Imperial technology with rituals that date back to the earliest days of the Imperium. The process of creating a single Grey Knight weapon can take decades, involving procedures that exist as much in the spiritual dimension as in the physical world. Grey Knight power armor is forged from materials that include blessed silver drawn from Terra's moon, ceramite that has been exposed to psychic energies for centuries, and adamantium that has been consecrated through contact with relics of the Emperor himself. The resulting protection is not merely physical but spiritual as well, creating a barrier that demons find painful even to look upon. The armor's machine spirit is not the relatively simple artificial intelligence found in standard power armor, but a fragment of pure faith made manifest, a being of living belief that shares the Grey Knight's absolute dedication to the destruction of chaos. The force weapons wielded by Grey Knights represent the pinnacle of psychic weapon technology, artifacts that exist partially in the warp and partially in real space simultaneously. Each weapon is attuned to its wielder during a ritual that binds their souls together in a relationship that transcends normal concepts of ownership. The blade becomes an extension of the Grey Knight's will, capable of cutting through the barriers between dimensions or severing the connections that allow demons to maintain coherence in the material universe. The most potent Grey Knight weapons bear names and histories that stretch back thousands of years, their power growing with each demon they have slain and each victory they have won. These artifacts are passed down through the chapter, according to rituals that ensure they will always find their way to the warriors most capable of wielding them effectively. Some of these weapons have developed personalities of their own over the millennia, becoming almost intelligent in their hatred of chaos and their dedication to its destruction. The organization of the Grey Knights reflects their unique mission and capabilities. Unlike standard Space Marine chapters, which are organized into companies based primarily on tactical considerations, the Grey Knights structure themselves according to principles that take into account both military effectiveness and psychic resonance. Their brotherhood is divided into 8 companies, each one attuned to a different aspect of the anti-demonic arts. The first company, known as the Paladins, consists of the most veteran and psychically powerful Grey Knights, warriors who have survived centuries of combat against the most dangerous entities the warp can produce. These brothers serve as the chapter's ultimate weapon, deployed only against threats that are beyond the capabilities of lesser warriors to handle. A single squad of paladins represents more concentrated anti-demon capability than most Imperial sectors possess in their entire military forces. The remaining companies are organized according to their primary areas of specialization and the types of threats they are most commonly deployed to face. Some focus on rapid response to emerging daemon incursions, others on long-term purification campaigns that can take decades to complete. Each company maintains its own support elements and specialized equipment, allowing them to operate independently for extended periods without requiring resupply or reinforcement from Titan. The second company specializes in surgical strikes against specific daemon entities. Their members trained in the arts of precise banishment and targeted exorcism. When a particular demon has been identified as posing a threat to Imperial space, it is usually the second company that receives the mission to hunt down and destroy the creature before it can complete whatever blasphemous plan it has set in motion. The third company focuses on planetary purification operations, massive campaigns that can take decades or even centuries to complete. These brothers are experts in cleansing entire worlds of chaos taint, working methodically through contaminated regions to ensure that every trace of corruption is eradicated. They understand that such operations cannot be rushed, that thoroughness is more important than speed when dealing with enemies that can hide in the spaces between thoughts. The fourth company handles space-based operations, their members trained to fight demons in the unique environment of void warfare. Demon incursions aboard starships present special challenges, as the confined spaces and complex systems of a vessel can be turned into advantages by entities that exist partially outside normal physics. Fourth Company Grey Knights are masters of boarding actions and ship-cleansing operations, capable of purging even the largest vessels of chaos contamination. The Fifth Company specializes in urban warfare and hive city operations. The dense populations and complex architecture of Imperial cities create ideal conditions for daemon manifestation, as the psychic energy of millions of minds provides ample fuel for warp entities seeking to establish themselves in real space. Fifth Company brothers understand the unique challenges of fighting in such environments, where collateral damage must be minimized and civilian populations protected from exposure to corrupting influences. The Sixth Company focuses on research and intelligence gathering, their members serving as the chapter's experts on demonic lore and chaos theory. These warriors spend much of their time in the archives of Titan, studying captured artifacts and analyzing intelligence reports to identify patterns that might indicate emerging threats. When they take the field, it is usually to investigate anomalies that require the insight of scholars as much as the skills of warriors. The Seventh Company handles recruitment and training operations, overseeing the transformation of candidates into full Grey Knights. These veterans understand better than any the precise requirements of the creation process, the subtle signs that indicate whether a candidate will survive the modifications, and the psychological pressures that must be applied to forge warriors capable of facing the ultimate enemies of mankind. The 8th Company serves as the chapter's reserve and rapid response force, maintaining constant readiness to deploy wherever threats emerge that require immediate attention. These warriors are kept in a state of perpetual preparation, their equipment maintained at peak efficiency, and their minds attuned to the psychic currents that might herald the approach of demonic incursions. The Grey Knight's fortress monastery on Titan exists in a state of carefully controlled reality distortion, its architecture defying normal physical laws in ways that serve both practical and spiritual purposes. The facility is built around a series of chambers that exist partially outside normal space-time, creating environments where the laws of physics can be adjusted to suit the needs of training and research. Here, Grey Knights can practice combat techniques against simulated demons in conditions that exactly match the reality-warping effects of actual demonic incursions. The deepest levels of the fortress contain archives that store knowledge so dangerous that even reading about it can corrupt lesser minds. These vaults hold complete records of every daemon the Grey Knights have encountered, detailed analyses of chaos corruption patterns, and tactical doctrines for combating threats that officially do not exist. Access to these archives is restricted even among the Grey Knights themselves, with only the most senior brothers permitted to study the most dangerous materials. The chapter's recruitment and training facilities occupy entire levels of the fortress, containing everything necessary to transform selected candidates into fully functional Grey Knights. The process is overseen by senior brothers who have dedicated their existence to perfecting the techniques of anti-demon warfare, masters whose knowledge spans centuries of combat against the forces of chaos. The fortress also contains manufacturing facilities where Grey Knight weapons and armor are created using techniques that combine advanced Imperial technology with rituals so ancient that their origins are lost in the mists of pre-Imperial history. Master artificers work alongside tech priests who have been specially trained and conditioned to resist chaos corruption, creating equipment that exists as much in the spiritual dimension as in the physical world. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Grey Knights is their perfect record of incorruptibility. In 10,000 years of existence, not a single Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos corruption, a feat unmatched by any other Imperial organization. This is not merely a matter of superior training or stronger will, though both certainly play a role. The Grey Knights were literally designed to be incorruptible, their creation process incorporating safeguards and redundancies that operate at levels so fundamental that corruption is not simply resisted but rendered impossible. This incorruptibility comes at a price, however. Grey Knights exist in a state of spiritual isolation that would drive normal humans insane, cut off from many of the emotions and experiences that make life meaningful for lesser beings. They cannot form close personal relationships in the way that baseline humans do, their enhanced nature creating barriers between themselves and others that cannot be crossed. They experience no physical pleasures beyond the satisfaction of duty fulfilled, no artistic appreciation beyond recognition of tactical perfection, no love beyond their absolute dedication to the Emperor's will. In many ways, Grey Knights are more conceptual entities than individual beings, living embodiments of specific ideas and principles rather than complete personalities in the conventional sense. Each brother represents a different aspect of the anti-daemon arts, their individual characteristics shaped by the particular role they were created to fulfill within the larger structure of the chapter. This conceptual nature makes them uniquely suited to combat enemies that are themselves concepts given form. When a Grey Knight fights a demon, the battle is not merely between two physical entities, but between competing ideas about the nature of reality itself. The daemon represents chaos, corruption, and the dissolution of order into entropy. The Grey Knight embodies purity, law, and the imposition of absolute order upon chaotic systems. The tactics employed by Grey Knights in combat against demonic forces bear little resemblance to conventional military doctrine. Standard Imperial strategy emphasizes overwhelming firepower, superior logistics, and the application of massive resources to achieve tactical objectives. But such approaches are often counterproductive when fighting demons, whose very nature allows them to turn strength into weakness and advantage into vulnerability. Instead, Grey Knights rely on precision, timing, and the application of force at exactly the right moment to achieve maximum effect. A single Grey Knight armed with the proper knowledge can accomplish what entire armies cannot, banishing greater demons through the precise application of psychic power rather than brute force. Their battles are as much intellectual exercises as physical confrontations, requiring deep understanding of demonic nature and the specific weaknesses that each type of entity possesses. The weapons used by Grey Knights in these battles are chosen not for their raw destructive power, but for their symbolic significance and spiritual resonance. A blessed silver blade may seem primitive compared to plasma weapons or melter guns, but against demonic entities, it is infinitely more effective because it represents concepts that are fundamentally opposed to the nature of chaos. The blade cuts not just through physical matter, but through the conceptual frameworks that allow demons to exist in the material universe. Grey Knights also employ tactics that would seem nonsensical to conventional military thinking, but are devastatingly effective against chaos forces. They might spend hours in meditation before a battle, aligning their psychic energies with cosmic forces that exist beyond the normal parameters of warfare. They conduct their attacks according to numerical patterns that correspond to sacred geometries, moving across the battlefield in formations that create psychic resonances capable of disrupting demonic manifestations. The litanies and prayers spoken by Grey Knights during combat serve multiple purposes beyond simple morale boosting. Each phrase is chosen for its specific psychic frequency, creating sound patterns that are literally painful for demons to hear. When an entire squad chants in unison, they generate harmonic effects that can weaken demonic entities across wide areas, making them vulnerable to physical attack by disrupting the warp energies that maintain their coherence. The most potent Grey Knight battle prayers are those that invoke the true names of demons, words of power that exist in languages predating human speech. Speaking a demon's true name in the proper context can cause it immediate and severe damage, forcing it to confront aspects of its own nature that it has tried to forget or deny. Master Grey Knights spend centuries learning these names and the proper pronunciation required to use them effectively in combat. But perhaps the most important aspect of Grey Knight tactics is their understanding of when not to fight. Unlike conventional military forces, which are trained to engage enemies aggressively and seek decisive victories through superior force, Grey Knights often find that the best solution to a demonic incursion is containment rather than confrontation. Some entities are too powerful to be banished through direct assault, requiring instead that they be trapped within carefully constructed psychic barriers until they lose interest in the material universe and return to the warp voluntarily. The Grey Knights maintain extensive networks of monitoring stations throughout the galaxy, facilities that scan for signs of demonic activity and potential chaos incursions. These stations are staffed by personnel who have been specially trained and conditioned to resist corruption. Individuals whose minds have been modified to perceive the early warning signs of warp instability without being driven insane by the experience. When a potential threat is identified, Grey Knights are deployed according to protocols that take into account not just the military aspects of the situation, but the spiritual and psychological factors as well. A single demon manifesting on a lightly populated agricultural world might require a completely different response than the same entity appearing in a major hive city, not because of differences in military threat, but because of variations in the psychic environment and the potential for corruption to spread. The Grey Knight's relationship with other Imperial organizations is complex and often strained by the requirements of secrecy that surround their operations. Most Imperial forces are not aware of their existence, and those few who encounter them directly are subjected to memory modification procedures that remove all traces of the experience. This is not merely a matter of operational security, but an essential safeguard against the spread of knowledge that could be used by Chaos forces to predict and counter Grey Knight tactics. Even among the highest levels of Imperial command, knowledge of the Grey Knights is compartmentalized and restricted. The Inquisition maintains the most extensive records of their activities, but even Inquisitors are provided only with information that is directly relevant to their current operations. Complete knowledge of Grey Knight capabilities and methods is restricted to perhaps a dozen individuals in the entire Imperium, and even they are not privy to all aspects of the chapter's activities. This secrecy extends to the Grey Knight's own records and documentation. Their archives use encoding systems that exist partially in the warp, making them impossible to read without the proper psychic keys. Even among the brothers themselves, operational details are shared only on a need-to-know basis, with each warrior receiving exactly the information necessary for his current mission and no more. The psychological cost of this existence is enormous. Grey Knights live in a state of constant vigilance that would break the minds of lesser beings, always aware that they are surrounded by enemies who exist beyond the normal parameters of reality. They can trust no one completely, form no lasting relationships, and find comfort only in the execution of their duties and the certainty of their faith. Yet they endure because they understand the stakes involved. Every daemon they banish, every incursion they prevent, every corruption they cleanse represents millions or billions of lives saved from fates worse than death. They are the thin silver line that stands between humanity and the complete domination of chaos. Guardians whose very existence makes possible the continued survival of the species they have sworn to protect. The training regimens of the Grey Knights go beyond anything experienced by conventional space marines. While all Astartes undergo rigorous physical and mental conditioning, Grey Knight training incorporates elements that exist in dimensions beyond normal reality. Candidates must learn to fight while their consciousness exists simultaneously in multiple planes of existence, mastering combat techniques that are as much philosophical exercises as physical disciplines. The earliest phases of training take place in chambers where reality itself is mutable, where the laws of physics can be adjusted to simulate the conditions that Grey Knights will face when confronting demonic entities. Here, initiates learn to maintain their sense of self when surrounded by environments that actively seek to dissolve individual identity into component parts. They practice moving through spaces where up and down have no meaning, where time flows backwards, and where the very concept of distance becomes fluid and unreliable. Mental training is equally demanding. Grey Knights must develop the ability to think in patterns that are fundamentally alien to baseline human consciousness, learning to process information that exists in forms that normal minds cannot even perceive. They study the deep structure of chaos corruption, examining how demonic influence operates at levels that transcend the merely psychological to affect the basic fabric of reality itself. This education is not without its dangers. Even with all their safeguards and protections, some initiates are lost during the training process, their minds unable to cope with exposure to concepts that are literally incomprehensible to human consciousness. These casualties are not mourned in the conventional sense, for the brothers understand that such losses are inevitable given the nature of what they are attempting to achieve. Those who survive the training emerge as beings who exist partially outside the normal parameters of human experience. They retain their individual personalities and memories, but these are overlaid with knowledge and capabilities that set them apart from all other forms of life in the galaxy. They can perceive threats that exist in dimensions beyond the physical, communicate through means that transcend language, and fight using principles that violate conventional understanding of combat. The weapons training of Grey Knights incorporates techniques that have been developed specifically for combat against entities that exist partially outside normal reality. Conventional martial arts assume opponents who are bound by physical laws, who must obey principles of momentum and leverage, who can be defeated through superior speed or strength. But demons are not constrained by such limitations, requiring combat methods that can address threats existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Grey Knight combat doctrine emphasizes the unity of mind, body, and spirit in ways that would seem mystical to ordinary observers, but which represent practical necessities when facing enemies that can attack on multiple levels of existence at once. A demon might assault its opponent physically, while simultaneously attempting to corrupt their thoughts and drain their spiritual energy. Only a warrior trained to defend on all these fronts simultaneously can hope to survive such encounters. The chapter's combat formations reflect these unique requirements. Grey Knight squads do not merely coordinate their physical movements, but synchronize their psychic emanations, creating group effects that are far more powerful than the sum of their individual capabilities. When a squad of Grey Knights advances into battle, they form what their doctrines refer to as a psychic phalanx, a formation that exists as much in the warp as in real space. This phalanx effect allows Grey Knights to share sensory information across dimensions, giving each warrior awareness of threats that his physical senses cannot detect. It also enables them to pool their psychic strength, channeling the combined mental energy of the entire squad through individual warriors when maximum power is required for specific tasks. The most experienced Grey Knight formations can maintain psychic coherence even when separated by vast distances, their consciousness linking across space to coordinate operations that span multiple star systems. This capability makes them uniquely effective at hunting demons that attempt to hide by spreading their essence across different locations, as the Grey Knights can track such entities through dimensions where physical distance has no meaning. The chapter's relationship with the Inquisition represents one of the most complex partnerships in Imperial service. While the Grey Knights maintain their independence and answer ultimately to the Emperor alone, they work closely with Inquisitors of the Ordo Malleus, the branch of the Inquisition specifically dedicated to combating demonic threats. This cooperation is essential because Inquisitors possess resources and authority that complement the Grey Knights' specialized capabilities. While Grey Knights are supreme in direct combat against demons, Inquisitors have the political power and investigative resources needed to identify threats before they fully manifest. The combination of inquisitorial intelligence gathering and Grey Knight combat effectiveness creates a partnership that is greater than the sum of its parts. However, this relationship is not without its tensions. Inquisitors are accustomed to absolute authority within their spheres of operation, but Grey Knights answer to no earthly power save the Emperor himself. This can create conflicts when Inquisitors issue orders that Grey Knights believe are tactically unsound or spiritually dangerous. Such disputes are usually resolved through careful negotiation, but occasionally they escalate to levels that require intervention from the highest authorities in both organizations. The Grey Knights also maintain relationships with selected elements of the Adeptus Mechanicus, particularly those tech priests who specialize in the creation and maintenance of equipment designed to combat chaos corruption. These Mechanicus adepts undergo special conditioning and psychic screening to ensure their resistance to demonic influence, as the weapons and armor they create must incorporate elements that exist partially in the warp. The Forges of Titan operate according to principles that combine advanced Imperial technology with rituals so ancient that their origins predate the Great Crusade itself. Master Artificers work alongside tech priests and selected Grey Knights to create equipment that is as much spiritual artifact as technological device. Each piece of Grey Knight war gear is individually crafted, its creation process taking years or even decades to complete. The most potent weapons created by these forges are works of art as much as instruments of war, their surfaces inscribed with prayers and benedictions in dozens of languages, some of which have been dead for millennia. These inscriptions are not merely decorative but serve as integral components of the weapon's function, creating psychic resonances that enhance its effectiveness against chaos entities. The chapter's vehicles and starships incorporate similar principles, their construction involving materials and techniques that exist at the intersection of technology and mysticism. Grey Knight strike cruisers are equipped with weapon systems that can fire projectiles existing partially in the warp, allowing them to engage targets that conventional weapons cannot affect. Their defensive systems include shields that operate by creating barriers in multiple dimensions simultaneously, providing protection against attacks that might bypass normal defensive measures. The most important of the Grey Knight's assets are not their weapons or ships, but their knowledge. The archives of Titan contain information that represents 10,000 years of accumulated experience in combating the forces of chaos. Every daemon encountered, every corruption identified, every successful banishment or exorcism is recorded in detail, creating a body of knowledge that is without equal in the galaxy. This information is organized according to principles that take into account not just the practical aspects of demon fighting, but the deeper truths about the nature of chaos itself. The archives are structured as much around philosophical concepts as tactical considerations, recognizing that understanding the enemy is as important as knowing how to destroy it. Access to these archives is restricted even among the Grey Knights themselves, with different levels of information available to warriors based on their rank, experience, and specific assignments. The deepest vaults contain knowledge so dangerous that exposure to it could corrupt even a Grey Knight's incorruptible soul. Texts that describe aspects of chaos so fundamental that merely reading about them could tear holes in the fabric of reality. The guardians of these archives are ancient Grey Knights who have dedicated their entire existence to the preservation and study of anti-daemon lore. These brothers have accumulated centuries of experience in combating every conceivable form of chaos corruption, their knowledge encompassing not just the practical aspects of demon hunting, but the deepest philosophical implications of humanity's war against the powers of the warp. The chapter's intelligence-gathering operations extend throughout the galaxy, using methods that range from conventional espionage to techniques that exist entirely in the psychic dimension. Grey Knight operatives can gather information by reading the psychic residue left by past events, scanning the memories of corrupted individuals, or even traveling backwards through time to observe events that occurred before their arrival. These capabilities make the Grey Knights uniquely effective at identifying threats in their earliest stages, before demons have had time to establish themselves firmly in real space. By intervening early, often before local authorities are even aware that a problem exists, they can prevent minor corruptions from growing into major incursions that would require massive military responses to contain. The precision of these interventions is remarkable. A single Grey Knight might materialize on a world where a demon is in the process of possessing a key political figure, eliminate the threat with surgical efficiency, and disappear again without any witnesses ever becoming aware of what transpired. To outside observers, it might appear that the official in question simply died of natural causes or suffered an accident, with no indication that supernatural forces were involved. This approach to demon hunting reflects the Grey Knight's understanding that the most effective battles against chaos are those that are won before they are fought. By maintaining constant surveillance of potential trouble spots and responding immediately to signs of demonic activity, they can prevent many threats from ever reaching the level where conventional military intervention would be required. The chapter's rapid response capabilities are built around their unique relationship with warp travel. While most Imperial ships must rely on navigators to guide them through the warp, Grey Knights possess psychic abilities that allow them to travel through the warp more directly. Their enhanced consciousness can perceive the currents and eddies of warp space with clarity that exceeds even the most gifted navigators, allowing them to take routes that would be impossible for normal vessels. This capability enables Grey Knights to respond to threats with speed that seems impossible to conventional military thinking. A Grey Knight strike force might receive word of a demon incursion on the far side of the galaxy and arrive at the crisis point before local forces have had time to mount an effective response. Their ability to travel through dimensions that exist outside normal time-space relationships allows them to be everywhere they are needed, whenever they are needed. The psychological impact of these sudden appearances cannot be underestimated. To enemies of the Imperium, the Grey Knights seem to materialize from nowhere, their silver armor gleaming with inner fire as they bring destruction to the forces of chaos. To Imperial forces, their arrival is a sign that the situation has escalated beyond normal parameters, that they are facing threats that require the intervention of humanity's most specialized warriors. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Grey Knights is not their supernatural abilities or their perfect weapons, but their unwavering dedication to their mission. In 10,000 years of service, they have never wavered in their purpose, never questioned their orders, never shown the slightest sign of corruption or moral compromise. They exist in a state of absolute certainty about their role in the cosmos, understanding with perfect clarity that they are the thin, silver line standing between humanity and complete annihilation. This dedication manifests in ways that would seem fanatical to ordinary humans, but which represent rational responses to the threats they face. A Grey Knight will willingly sacrifice his life to prevent a single demon from escaping back into the warp, understanding that allowing such an entity to survive could lead to the corruption of entire worlds. They accept casualties that would be considered catastrophic by normal military standards, because they understand that the alternative to victory is not defeat, but the complete obliteration of everything they have sworn to protect. The chapter's records contain accounts of battles where Grey Knights fought against impossible odds, their squads reduced to single survivors who continued fighting until their last breath. These warriors understood that retreat was not an option, that allowing chaos forces to claim victory would create ripple effects that could doom millions of innocent lives. Their sacrifice bought time for reinforcements to arrive, for evacuations to be completed, or simply for the truth about the enemy's nature to be recorded so that future generations would know what they were facing. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods echoes through the warp, the Grey Knights stand as proof that some things remain pure, that some warriors cannot be broken, and that the Emperor's protection extends to dimensions where even space marines fear to tread. They are the secret legion, the hidden champions, the silver brotherhood that burns like a star in the heart of darkness. And they are humanity's final hope against the endless night.